to ask the First Minister what engagement she has planned for the rest of the week.
First Minister.
Engagements to take forward the Government's programme for Scotland.
Kezia Dugdale.
The treatment time guarantee will ensure that eligible patients start treatment within 12 weeks of the treatment being agreed. That's what we were told by Nicola Sturgeon when she introduced the legal right to treatment for patients. So can the First Minister tell us how many NHS patients were not seen within 12 weeks since this legal right was introduced in 2012?
First Minister.
Well, since the legal right was introduced in 2012, there have been 53,257 who have waited longer than 12 weeks, but there have been 1,267,000 treated within 12 weeks. Waiting times are lower than they were when we took office, but we have work to do because of rising demand in our health service, and we continue to ensure that our health service has the investment and record numbers of staff so that we can continue to provide the best care and treatment for patients across the country.
Kezia Dugdale.
That's a legal guarantee to 53,000 people broken. And in fact, over the last few months have been the worst on record. And these aren't just statistics. It's pensioners in need of a knee replacement having to wait for months, or people waiting for eye surgery facing delay after delay. And each time I bring an individual case to this chamber, the First Minister promises to deal with it. It would take me centuries to work through each of these 53,000 cases. How bad do things have to get before she steps in to fix this mess?
Well,
First Minister.
Kezia Dugdale talked about records when it came to waiting times. It's worth pointing out that when this government took office, there were only 85% of patients treated within 18 weeks. Not only have we reduced waiting times from 18 weeks to 12 weeks, a higher percentage of patients are now being seen within that shorter waiting time. So that's the progress that we are making. We also see record numbers of staff working in our health service, and we see record levels of investment in our health service. And I know Kezia Dugdale doesn't like me to point out this fact, but there is going to be more investment in our health service under this government than there would have been in the admittedly unlikely event that Labour had won the election, because Labour promised the lowest increase in health funding of any party represented in this chamber. That is the reality. So we have rising demand for our health service. That's why we continue to invest to build up the capacity of our health service so that we can continue to ensure that more and more patients get seen within these shorter waiting times.
Kezia Dugdale.
There she goes again, Presiding Officer, bringing up a 10-year-old record of a Labour government and pointing at England. It just doesn't cut it with patients. It doesn't cut it. She likes to remind the chamber. The First Minister likes to remind the chamber that she's going to spend £500 million more over the lifetime of this Parliament. But what she didn't tell us is that Audit Scotland told us last month that she has to cut £500 million out of health budgets in this year alone through their health boards. That is a fact that she cannot avoid. In fact, it sums out the priorities of this government. Whilst Labour Party activists were out campaigning with NHS staff and patients at the weekend to protect the NHS, the SNP were out talking about independence. It's no surprise that the SNP don't want to campaign on the NHS, because here is their record. Local services facing closure, missed targets and a growing workforce crisis. Isn't it the case that under the SNP, the NHS is stuck in the waiting room whilst the First Minister plots a second referendum?
First Minister.
Well, the reason Kezia Dugdale rightly asked about the performance of this government, and when you're talking about the performance of this government, it is perfectly reasonable to look at the situation we inherited and the progress that has been made since. Now, Kezia Dugdale wants to quote Audit Scotland. Here's what Audit Scotland said in its recent report. Overall staff levels are at the highest level ever in NHS Scotland. Now, when we took office, as I said, 85% of patients in Scotland, this is Q1 2007, 85% of patients, inpatients in day cases were being seen within 18 weeks at that time. Now there are almost 90% of patients being seen within 12 weeks. So the waiting time is shorter and the percentage of patients being seen within it is larger. Now that is progress, I think, in anybody's language. But it's not enough progress. That is why we are committed to continuing to increase investment, not by £500 million over this Parliament, but by £500 million more than inflation over this Parliament. Labour simply committed to inflationary increases for the National Health Service. So more investment, more members of staff, reforming our health service so that we get more investment into social care as well. These are the actions patients across the country want to see, and these are the actions we will continue to take.
Just one constituency supplementary this week from Jackie Bailey.
On Monday evening, over 200 people attended a public meeting to express their opposition to the proposed closure of the Vale of Leven maternity unit. One of those attending said, and I quote, "If the Cabinet Secretary for Health is not doing her job, then I am going to tell her and hold her to account. She has said she is committed to the Vale. The problem is that we've got to make sure she sticks to that." Those were the words of the SNP group leader on Western Bartonshire Council. Does the First Minister agree with him? And will she make sure that the Cabinet Secretary for Health sticks to the vision for the Vale?
First Minister.
This government is committed to the vision for the Vale, and it is worth pointing out, I think, because people perhaps have longer memories than Labour would like them to have. If Labour had won the election in 2007, it is highly unlikely that the Vale of Leven Hospital would even be open today. That is the reality. This government stepped in. We saved the Vale of Leven Hospital, just as we saved accident emergency services at Monklands and at Ayr. And we will continue to stand up for local services because that's what people expect of this government, and people know it's not what they got when that lot were last in government.